Welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching or listening to this podcast, remember, you are the resistance. All right, everybody, that's our little intro. We are your hosts. I'm Mark, and this is
RedBeard.
All right, and welcome to episode 8. And correct me if I'm wrong. Today is the 23rd. Is today the 23rd?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
it's the 23rd of May. All right, well, time is flying. We're having fun, right? And I don't know about everybody else out there, if you're watching this video, what your life is like, but holy crap, has it just been a lot of ass kicking going on.
Oh, yeah.
One of our previous videos, I used this little meme of a guy fighting a bear. And if you've talked to me on the phone from Centerline Systems, you'll hear me say, like sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you. That bear has been eating or kicking my ass the last like 3 or 4 weeks. But here we are. Without further ado and no more whining and complaining, I'm Mark, and this is
RedBeard.
We are your hosts, and this is episode 8. And tonight, we're actually probably going to be able to do this one in an hour. And that's kind of why we chose this topic. We're trying out a slightly new format. Before we get into the actual conversation, we'll just let you know, we're going to talk about RFK Jr. That's going to be the subject of conversation here between Jeremy and myself. Before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping. Last episode, go back and watch episode 7. That was a giveaway episode. And I'm wearing one of their hoodies right now. Marshall Hardware.
That's a good looking hoodie.
Yep. So go back and look at that episode for the giveaway for a chance to win one of these hoodies. And Jeremy, that's the only housekeeping I have. Do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. No more housekeeping. Hoodie. Well, here I got one little piece of housekeeping. Cheers to you, sir. I'm not joking. I'm so broken and tired right now. I'm having a beer, and I am not a beer drinker, people, but boy, this is going to taste good. So.
Hey. Desperate times call for desperate measures, Mark.
That's about how I feel today.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. We're going to jump into this episode, and we're going to talk about RFK. And you've heard both myself, Jeremy, many of our guests say in previous episodes, I really don't care what your political affiliation is. I mean, I'm well beyond the whole Republican Democrat. I personally think that's just a bunch of bullshit. And I've voted, a matter of fact, and I've voted on both sides of the aisle. I've voted for Democrats in the past, and I've voted for Republicans. I usually just try to vote for who I think is the best person for the job. I don't know. Crazy idea, right? Where did that go wrong? What's that?
I said as people should.
No, right? Yeah, right. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. So when it comes to RFK, RFK has announced that he is going to run and for the Democratic nomination. I guess I'll just just throw out a couple things, and we'll just kind of go over to Jeremy real quickly. But personally, I don't think he's going to get the nomination unless the rotting bag of flesh, is if somebody finally wakes up and realizes, like, this individual is not capable of leading our nation. And I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you voted for Joe Biden. It's clear that this individual is not capable of holding the office of the president. So short of something else happening in the next 2 years. But the fact that I guess what I'm just trying to say is I don't think RFK, now again, there's all kinds of things that could happen in the next couple of years, but I don't think he's going to get the Democratic nomination. However, the point, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring up this as a topic is if you look at what RFK has been saying in the news in the last couple of weeks, and I think Jeremy's going to kind of not do a deep dive, but he's going to talk about some of these issues.
Yeah.
On the surface, you're like, it looks pretty good. That sounds pretty good. Right? That seems kind of rational, right? Okay. And I'm just going to throw it right out there. Again, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, this is just my personal opinion. I think it's all bullshit. I think it's a facade, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to stop talking and kind of bring it over to Jeremy. So RFK Jr., he's saying some pretty good things right now.
Yep.
And if it was coming from anyone else, I would probably be giving it a pretty serious listen. I'd be like, okay, I like where this guy or this gal's going with this. I'm like, I'm interested. I want to learn more.
Yeah.
But I will just say this. This man, just like Joe Robinette, Biden has been, did I say, is that his middle name? Is it Robinette? something like that.
I honestly don't care enough to know what the guy's middle name
there
is.
you go. Right. That says enough right there. But he's been in, so RFK Jr. has been in the political world for a very long time. How is it that only just now recently he's making these type of comments? And I'm willing to accept, and I've seen some older video footage of him making some other type of comments and, about a different subject, excuse me. And, there's a little bit of a fire, kind of a firebrand, but where is this individual?
Yeah.
Where has he been? Why hasn't he been this outspoken in the past? I mean, or was he just like keeping quiet and towing the party line? And that is where I'm going to come into this conversation, which is, I personally think it's subterfuge. I think it's the, look over here or the rope-a-dope, whatever you want to call it. I personally think it's a bunch of bullshit. And on that note, I'm going to shut up and let's come over to Jeremy.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm going to provide here real quick for full disclosure is I want to give just a brief summary of the issues that he's running on, because if we're going to get into this, it's important to understand kind of like what his base is, right? And I think Mark would agree. Like, if you're going to analyze somebody, you kind of have to do it justice, right, Mark?
Well, so, that's kind of a nice thing to do.
Well, you know what? Our personal opinions aside, like, it's the practical thing to do. Like, if in the end of the day, like, if you were going to vote for somebody, you're going to want to know what the guy's about, or at least as much as you can.
Well, hang on. I'm going to bring us both back up here on that note right there. So that's a great point. And so I just remember when Barack Obama was running, his first term, and I just heard everybody talk about hope and change. And I'm like, okay, what's his policy on this? What's his stance on that? Yeah. And no one ever had an answer. They didn't know shit about what his actual policies or what he was proposing. And once I realized, okay, this person hasn't actually listened to anything that Barack Obama's proposing that he's going to do as the president. And then I would say, okay, well, define change for me then, because it was all about hope and change. So I know it's a little bit of a long-winded diatribe, but it's going to come back full circle to what you just said.
100%.
And even then, people wouldn't be able to say things. I'm like, you do know that change does not always equal a positive outcome. Change can be bad.
It's not going to always be that net positive that everybody assumes that it's going to be. But that being said, I think the idea is like, look, like, know who I have to know who is running and on what matters and on what subjects. It's like, whether it's federally, state, local, whatever, like, that's
But just to that point, wouldn't you also say, look at their if they've been in politics for as long as these people have, look at their history of their tenure in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, again, how many times
you definitely have to get a good scope of somebody. Like, that's the biggest takeaway is, like, we've already said millions of times, do your research. So that being said, I'm just going to do a brief overview. So his big thing is, he goes on the idea of really bringing to the forefront of liberties and avoiding stuff like the outcomes from the Bush-Cheney period, to where we had the Patriot Act. I know that one thing that he's been running on pretty good has been, we should not be doing domestic spying on Americans, which I think is agreeable to most people, but whether or not that's going to come to fruition or not it would be seen, right? He's a big person on the First Amendment and many other rights oriented issues. And so he is looking at kind of going old school, at least according to what his website says, in terms of really protecting rights, civil rights, as they are. Now, what I would encourage is, after everybody watches this, like, actually go onto the website, take a look, read it yourself, because I like I said, this is going to be a brief summary. Bring it home is one of the next things. Like, his big thing is avoiding having the military spread out, being involved in conflicts, proxy wars, bombings, all of these ridiculous things. So, like, one of the things that the list that he has is having him fulfill the proper role of defending the country instead of going and always being involved in stuff that is none of our business. You know, I think it's becoming a more popular view. You know, and he, with that being said, covert operations, coups, paramilitaries, and a lot of other things. So his big thing is, let's bring the military back home. Let's defend our country, as opposed to being out there constantly being involved in every single thing possible. So that's kind of what his whole bring it home is about, is really bringing it, creating a national defense that's not all over the place. Which, I mean, I think, you know, at its core is kind of a noble objective, but again, remains to be seen, right?
Well, I just want to ask you this quick question, you know,
Yeah.
like, so again, I mean, I think if you are a conservative, right, if you are an American and you consider yourself conservative, all of that, everything that you just mentioned, you know, these are his statements, these are his policies, this is what he's espousing, this is what, you know, he's going to campaign on. Well, that resonates with me, you know, again, I'm like, you know, but at the end of the day, and I'm going to use kind of a Bongino, this is where I first heard it, was over on Bongino. It's like, most Republicans are Democrats and no Democrats are Republicans. So isn't it kind of interesting? Like, so at the end of the day, RFK Jr. is a Democrat. And what I like, though, and this is where it does tug on my heartstrings. And that's why I kind of think it's fake, because I think it's designed that way. Or I just could be too cynical. Maybe I'm too black-pilled. But what you just said there about the bringing it back home, isn't that where all the classic liberals used to be, just even 10 years ago, Jeremy? Like, they would have been like opposed, go all the way back to Gulf War. Who was opposed to, you know, well, sane people were, but putting that aside, but that's when you had Democrats actually still acting like Democrats, you know?
Well, and
you see what I'm kind of getting at with his comments, or how I'm trying to tie his comments into it?
And ironically, to your point, when it came to 9/11, the people that least wanted to go over to the Middle East on the onset were Democrats. They wanted nothing to do with going into Iraq and then, you know, the whole Afghanistan thing. And I find it very interesting how, especially with current events, as it pertains to Ukraine, we've seen like a complete 180 to where it's like, we have to go over there. It's like, but why? So, but I agree with you 100%.
And I wasn't trying to detract away from it. I just, you know, as you hear him talk, it's like, okay. It sounds like, well, this is what the Democrats used to sound like back in the 1990s, in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I mean, like, but that's not who they, as you just pointed out, that's not who they sound like today, though, is it?
Right. And so on that point, you know, his when it comes to like his idea of a government for the people, it's getting rid of this, you know, the domestic spying and getting a handle on regulatory agencies. And, you know, and that is one thing that he has been pretty outspoken on, which is like, hey, look, like, dude, like, you guys can't be doing this. Like, this is just something that is not kosher whatsoever. And I think most people would agree, especially after the FBI hearings. I'm sure that left a sour taste in the mouth of many people. But they basically, you know, government and you know, the workings between government and tech platforms, you know, and the goings on with Wall Street and other agencies and stuff like that. And so, you know, it's his big thing is, look, we have got to get a handle on these out of control agencies. And moreover, like, why are we using intelligence apparatuses to spy on our own people? Well, there's several answers for that, but again, I think any logical person would be drawn to like, okay, well, yeah, like that makes sense. Like, we shouldn't be using this to spy on Americans.
So right there. So just a quick pause. So I got to ask you this question. See, this is why what you've just said, and these are the statements, these are the policies, or again, the platform that he's starting to run on, you know, as he's building and kind of, you know, creating his message and drafting, you know,
gaining
the
his
message
base
that he's going to present to the American people. But you just said it as well. And I know, doesn't it resonate with you? Like, you're like, oh, that I actually like that. That makes sense.
Right.
but it's coming from a Democrat. And see, this is my issue. And this is where I don't know, maybe I'm too black-pilled. If that would have come out of if that is spoken by like Ron Paul or Trump or DeSantis, and not getting into the politics of who's, this, that, or the other, but like that would have resonated with me. And coming out of RFK Jr., it still resonates, but I feel like I've been lied to so many times. I just have to sit there and call timeout and say, dude, I hear what you're saying, but I just know it's bullshit because you've got a D by your name, and that's who you guys are now. Or Jeremy, so this is a question I want to bring to you. Or is he actually, for whatever reasons, has been silent for so many years and now just finally said, just like many of us are, that's why we're doing this podcast. I mean, I'm checking myself. Yeah, maybe he had an awakening moment too. And he's like, that's it. I can't be quiet anymore. And even though, what he's saying is what you would have expected old school Democrats, classic liberals to have espoused. And a lot of it is I'm totally on board with. Does that make sense? Or do you think it's the
100%. Yeah. And I think that's the general appeal to him, especially as it pertains to, more conservative people, because a lot, and I want to be very trepidatious with saying that, because there are, when you look at the scope of conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, these should not always be equated. These terms should not always be equated with liberty, morality, or doing the right thing. And I want to be very clear about that. So
that's a good point.
It's something that people should have in the back of their mind. So when you're evaluating a politician, it's like, DeSantis does this and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, but at the same time, like, he could have done X, Y, and Z. And so you have to be open to the idea of evaluating information with an objective or a questioning point of view, I guess is what I'm saying. So just because something has a particular label or stamp on it does not always make it so. So I feel like that's important to kind of put out there. And go ahead.
Oh, no. You're just, as always, we don't have a script, but I'm the one today who's going to take us off script on a different direction. I know you still want to read a little bit more and give us more of a background of who this man is, but I feel like I can't wait here. You just mentioned DeSantis, and and I kind of saw your body language and how you were responding when you said his name. And I don't know if you were saying that because of that bill he just signed over in Israel, which is totally against the First Amendment, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a juxtaposition or a dichotomy between, like, in your mind, like RFK is out there talking about the Constitution and the First Amendment and freedom of speech. Now, whether he's going to get into section, 280 and stuff like that, I don't know. But to me, the moment you said DeSantis, all I thought is like, dude, you just passed probably one of to me, one of the most obviously anti-First Amendment bills that I've seen. Yeah. And then now you've got RFK, a Democrat, who and again, in today's terms, should be all about censorship.
Yeah.
Who sounds more like what you would have thought DeSantis would have been like.
RFK definitely comes across as a product of like 60 years ago. If that even makes any sense. Like,
it does, because I'm an old dinosaur too. So I like that, I guess.
Yeah. So like he is definitely, and I would even say like 60 or 70 years ago, because when you really look at it, like back in the 50s, I mean, like that was when his family really got rolling and stuff like that. And I hate to even equate the whole family thing, but if we look at it, like that was a time to where, like, again, I feel like the attitude was somewhat different. It's not every person that was liberal or Democrat had, ridiculous views. And quite frankly, it was the same type of thing as it pertained to Republicans and conservatives, right? Like there was an environment where people could sit down in a diner and have different points of view and be able to have a conversation. So like that was I think the appeal to RFK Jr. is he's reminiscent of a good time in the United States, albeit there were trepidatious things. There were a lot of issues still, but it was a better time, I think, for more people than it was negative. And I think there again, like he's a product of his time, right? So, again, like you said, whether it's genuine, yet to be seen. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Mark. But.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm just as you're laying out, who this man is. Like again, the broad broad strokes. And you just mentioned DeSantis. I just couldn't help but like my brain couldn't tell my mouth to shut up. I was like, because everybody talks about DeSantis, and look, and I'll just be the first to say it. Trump isn't a Republican, and not in my opinion. I mean, like, and I don't even know what that even means. I mean, like, I don't care about Republicans either. I care about somebody who actually wants to conserve the Constitution of the United States of America. Period. I don't care if you got a D, an R, or an I in front of your title. But when you mentioned DeSantis, all I immediately went to was like, DeSantis just went and signed a bill that is very much opposed, anti-First Amendment. And then yet here we're talking about RFK. And I hate to admit this, but so again, I think it's a rope-a-dope. I hope I'm wrong, but it sounds like he's actually, he's saying the things that you would have thought Trump and DeSantis should be saying right now.
One would think, and it's so, and to that point, speaking of a person who's a product of his time, one of the things that, it's his whole purview of like trying to like fix the divide that exists. And this is part of his, platform is getting people to not identify as the party that they vote with, but rather to identify themselves as Americans, right? Like we're first and foremost, like, look, like he, like a quote that he has is, my aim is to convince every Democrat you're not a Democrat and every Republican you're not a Republican, right? So like basically the gist of that, at least from how I perceive it, is, look, we're Americans first. Like the whole insanity of this going back and forth and eating each other is it's not working. We've gotten nowhere. We've more than likely regressed as a country. And so like there again, again, people go on to his campaign website again. And look it up for yourselves. Like I would actually highly encourage it, just because you're doing yourself a service by becoming informed. But that's, I think that's kind of interesting of how, albeit he's running as a Democrat, he's very much wanting to be like, look, like this is the party thing is not it, which again is not like the modern day Democrats. So
but it is very much like the Democrats during the day of his father and his uncle, and so I wasn't alive during that era, but I was alive not too long after that. And Democrats were still, that still was kind of who they were back then, in the 70s and the 80s, right? I think it started taking a turn in the 80s, but we'll save that for later. Continue, sir.
Yep. Yeah. And so like I said, go on, take a look at it for yourselves, and then come to your own conclusions. And the thing of it is it's important to even follow people you don't like, just so you can get a better understanding of how they build their base and their character, and whether or not they're staying true to what it is that they're saying. Because if you're not for somebody, it's equally as important to understand where they're coming from as it is the person you're for, because you still might have to contend with the person that you don't like at some point. So
you got to know your enemy. Yeah. If I'm opposed to Jeremy and I are political candidates. Yeah. Like, well, then how do I even know that I'm a better candidate than Jeremy? I have to know Jeremy's platform. I have to know what Jeremy stands for, what he's espousing and what he's proposing, and the direction that's going to take us both either economically or geopolitically or militarily, so on and so forth. No, you definitely have to go through. And actually, that's a great point you just mentioned, because, I'm not making an excuse here to anyone who's watching. but it really, I mean, we're shooting this a little bit later in the day than we normally do because the bear has been kicking my ass all day long today, and I'm behind the power curve. But before, just like a few minutes before Jeremy and I went live and were able to talk to each other in the waiting room, I tried to pull up an article that I'd seen, I think a day or 2 days ago, and I could no longer find that article anymore. So to your point, Jeremy, go out and do your research, go to his website or whatever. Or, and look, there might be somebody saying there's no way I'm ever voting for a Democrat. I'm not trying to tell you to vote for a Democrat or a Republican. I'm saying what Jeremy's saying, like do your own research and follow your own conscience. You have a right to make your own decision. That R, D, or I, to me, that doesn't mean anything. Going back to Jeremy's first point, I want to know the character of the person who's running. That's what I want to know. But the point I'm just trying to make is I found it kind of interesting that an article that I just seen just a few days ago I couldn't find it anymore. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, so to Jeremy, the reason I'm bringing it up and bringing it back over to you is I don't know if you've seen that same thing, but it seems that he'll get a snippet or a little bit of a headline, and then that seems to get pigeonholed. And that brings me into are there other, whether it's fake or whether he's legit, but are there other powers within the DNC or the whole political, machine that, they can't control? He has the ability to speak. It's still a free country. But then the moment he speaks, it immediately gets pushed off to the side because it takes away from, our bag of oatmeal in chief.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to bring it up because it may be out of place here, but he did
you don't hate to bring it up. Bring it up, brother. I know you like to bring it up. Bring it up.
So he did also openly kind of just drop the bomb to where he's like, oh yeah, no, like I 100% like believe the CIA killed my dad, my uncle. And he, so I don't know if maybe that, that and some of the other things that he's espoused very openly, I might add. And I believe that there's, documents and stuff like that kind of playing into that corroboration. But I'm sure that probably to many people did not win him many favors.
Whoa, okay, hang on. You think those comments actually worked against him? Is that what you're saying?
It's possible. Yeah. Yeah. It's
okay. Are you taking that from like a deep state, hey, this guy's a threat because he might expose us type of position? Or what do you mean by like?
Yeah, I think that may be also why so much of what he does is not as out there, because at that juncture, when you come out and you're like, no, yeah, 100%, I believe that the CIA did kill my father and my uncle, and look, like the documents are out there. There's a lot of information out there. And, it was a bold move, especially before you're, or right around the time that you announce your candidacy. And overall, it kind of makes people look bad, because it's like, okay, like what else is he going to say? Because you got to remember, the guy has been in politics for a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I'm sorry. I was just laughing because you said it makes people look bad. I think the way I would have phrased it is it exposes bad people. Like I didn't just make up a lie to slander you and now you look bad. I actually pulled back the curtain so people could see how evil you were. That's how I would say it a little differently.
Yeah. And I like the way that you said that even better because, and so I wonder, as a result, like you said, like he'll come out and he'll do something, or he'll do a presser, or he'll have commentary. And I've seen the same thing. Like something new will come up and I'll be like, oh, look, like he went to go do this. And then, you go to share it or reference it or do whatever it is that you're trying to do, and nowhere to be found. You can find stuff all day with Trump and Biden and DeSantis and some of these other people, but it's like, why is it that it's so hard to find? Like he has a very prominent name. Let's not bullshit about this, right? Like,
yeah.
How is it that a guy who has one of the most prolific names in American history, for whatever reason, is the hardest to find his pressers, and so many other things. And again, it's a mild rabbit hole, but I think, you know, that perhaps when he came out and said some of the things that he said, like, this guy's definitely not our Democrat, you know, or whatever the case might be, or you know, there's so many possibilities that it's all speculation at this point, you know.
So you know, he's not. Well, and maybe he is. See, again, I was about to say something, and then like this part of me just caught myself and said, "Slow down before you say that." And I was going to say, you know, you just said maybe he's not our Democrat, and my response was going to be, well, maybe he's just not today's Democrat. Maybe he actually has stayed true to himself, you know, and from where he stood, you know, back in the day. To your point, if you actually can find some of the articles or the videos, you'll hear some of the positions he's had throughout time. He just hasn't been very vocal, and that always causes me a little bit of concern. Well, but you know, because he's a politician. I mean, so how many politicians aren't trying to be, you know, on the 6 o'clock news, right? That seems odd, right? But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's honestly, Jeremy, maybe that's maybe that's just kind of an indication of his character. Maybe that's a value. I don't know, but it is kind of odd to me that he's coming out. But then where you were going with that, bringing it into, you know, his family name and the family history and some of the comments he's made, that just, you know, again, see our previous videos. Can you trust the government? Like, why is it that, like you just said, someone else can come out and make these statements? I mean, Trump made the statement. He's like, hey, if I get reelected again,
weeks of coverage.
Well, yeah, but are you talking about the JFK assassination part of it?
Well, I was just saying, like, going off of what you're about to say with Trump is like, if Trump said something, shit, you'd hear about it for weeks.
Well, okay, but I was going to say Trump's comments specifically about the JFK assassination. He's come out this time around and said, hey, because, you know, he said it the first time and he kind of dropped the ball. So again, he's shown himself to be like, well, can I really trust you? You said you were going to do it the first time and you didn't do jack. But now Trump is out there saying, and this is my point, is though that those articles you can still find where Trump is saying, if I'm elected, I'm going to declassify everything that has to do with the JFK assassination. That information you can, whether it's even a Google search or a Bing search, you know, shitty search engines, or if you go into some other different search engines, you know, everybody, I'm not throwing other people on the bus here, like DuckDuckGo. I mean, there's, you know, back and forth, whether that's been bought out and, you know, or Brave, but whatever your search engine is, you know, there is, I mean, again, and I just realized I'm proving another point. See, what was it? I think it was episode 4 or 5. I actually was trying to search something as we were talking, and Google gave me one thing, which was all about, you know, which was to Jeremy's point of the corruption and the bullshit. And it was bolstering that claim, you know, trying to keep you in the dark. And then if you go to a different search engine, then you start finding, it was when you were talking about the German PM, who was like speaking out against the war in Ukraine or something like that. Yep. But so it's the same thing, and a long-winded way to get back to it. It's the same thing right now with RFK Jr. When he talks about the assassination of his father or his uncle, that's pigeonholed. Anything he says, you'll see it very quickly, and then it seems to be pigeonholed. Trump can come out and say the same thing, and that, as to Jeremy's point, that's in the headlines for the next week still. People are still talking about, you can still find it. I personally find that rather interesting. Which is a very polite way of saying I kind of call bullshit on that. But, you know, like something ain't right there. Like that's usually not how that works. And it's the powers to be, Jeremy. Sorry. Yeah. Again, from like a CIA deep state, you know, that there are these powers who are trying to control and manipulate data and the discourse within our society and censorship and all this kind of stuff. Well, isn't that exactly what you would expect to see? I mean, like, you know, hey, if this guy's a threat, if he is legit, he is a threat to the current Democratic Party. Would you agree with that, or what do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, and it's funny that you actually bring that up, because that's also one of the very things on his platform that he professes to be against is these agencies that do this type of shit, you know, and it's like, again, like, maybe the agencies themselves, whether it's the CIA, the FBI, whatever, Homeland in general, maybe they see him as a valid threat. It's hard to say because, I'm not RFK Jr. I don't know what the guy's thinking. I can't tell you what he's going to do, but yeah, maybe there is quite a bit to that, Mark. And and kind of going back to the whole thing regarding coverage, right? Like, dude, like you have a family member from the Kennedy family that is talking about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And it's like, you would think that would be something like, oh my God, like they're like, this is one of the family members. Like, we need to cover this because like, from their perspective, it's like one of the most important things in the world. And it's like, no, like, basically it's like, fuck this guy, like it's just like you said, like, it's kind of sus because in the end of the day, would that not be the person you'd want to hear from is the family member, especially as it pertains to his father, for God's sakes? Like there's a lot of questions around it. And again, people, look, like this is not an endorsement. It's not, we're not saying that we're going to go out and pull the lever for RFK Jr. It's providing some overview of a person that in my opinion, I never thought that I ever in my life would have ever seen a Kennedy of all people ever run for presidency again. So that's why I find it so interesting. And I think that's what it is. It's a very interesting situation. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Well, it is.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not going to lie. So I can't remember when JFK was assassinated. Was that 67 or 68? I don't remember off the top of my head. Good. Now I almost need to Google it real quickly, but my point is, so I was born not too long after that period of time, and there was all kinds of positive and negative during that era in American history and also in the world history. But what's that?
1963, November 20th.
Yeah, 63. Yeah. Well, wasn't the moon landing 68? Maybe that's when I'm confusing it with, because, he was a big advocate. We're like, we got to go to the moon, but he was also an advocate for special forces. He was an advocate for peace. He was an advocate for like truth within the government and no secret societies. I mean, like, and one of the things about JFK that nation of Minutemen. Yeah. Say that again. We were talking over each other. Say that one more time.
Yeah, no, like in one of his speeches, which is one of the more prolific speeches, he's like, we must be a nation of Minutemen.
Damn right.
Like
and spoiler alert, if you're still with us in the video, what Jeremy just said is going to be the subject, part of the subject of our next video, which is going to have to be about a nation of Minutemen, and it's going to have to do with whether. Well, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, don't rabbit hole it.
I digress. But see, I love that stuff about JFK, right? And even though I wasn't alive during that era, but again, I was born
perfect.
What's that?
He wasn't perfect,
Well, Jeremy, but you and I know, and everybody watching should know, no man or woman is perfect. Right. There's not a single one of us. We all have our flaws, and some of us we have more. And maybe more than others, and maybe we have fewer, but they're even greater flaws. I mean, we are not perfect creatures. I mean, we just aren't. Even though Jeremy's beard is kind of, my beard's starting to look perfect, but Jeremy's is, definitely more than that. But back onto the serious nature of it. But JFK actually had some, as a kid growing up, that was still recent history, and. And I just remembered, like, hey, dude, that man was pretty squared away, and that whole speech, like, ask not what you can do for your country, or ask what you can, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Like, that still resonates with me to this day. And like that attitude. And I think, Jeremy, to your point, are we not seeing some of that, whether that's through, the bloodline of the Kennedys or RFK Jr. just being an astute politician and tugging on those heartstrings? Are we not seeing a little bit of that attitude so far in what he's proposing and his political platform? What do you think?
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of the appeal for him.
Yeah, right.
It's again is like he's bringing back that old world of being of politics, right? Like he is for all intents and purposes, very much a an old school politician, but at the same time, one could even say he comes across as being fairly diplomatic, as as most people were back then, and you know I think generally too, like people were a little bit more well spoken back then. So they had charisma, they had like real charisma, not like uh, not like this aura of like this is, the teleprompter. In the end of the day, like I really do feel like people when they went up there, and it's not to say that they didn't have it back then, but it's like I really do feel like a lot of the stuff back then, like they probably did just kind of wing a lot of that shit, and
Well,
you know,
just to your point,
yeah,
look at some of Eisenhower's speeches,
yep,
Kennedy's speeches, and look, people want to like throw Nixon on the bus, but look at some of Nixon was probably one of the most popularly elected
yeah,
presidents in American history. Look
yep,
at some of his speeches, and then I'm going to have to give and I'm looking straight into the audience, the camera into the eyes of the audience, and I'm going to hate to say this. Carter actually had a couple good speeches,
yep.
and then you go into Reagan, and Reagan was, obviously his,
So spicy take,
like Reagan was like, I think probably one of the best at just that whole ad lib, and and I think that's why, and honestly, I think that's why a lot of people like Trump. Trump is
yeah,
actually good with, he's good on the, he can shoot, move, and communicate. He can react to something on the fly, move on his feet, and respond accordingly, and do it in a, and some people don't like some of the way Trump speaks,
yeah,
but oftentimes, if you look at it, he is very articulate and he's very smart, and he might say it differently than you quote unquote want a politician how to say it,
mhm,
but he still makes the same point. I think he actually makes it a little bit more succinctly because he says it
mhm,
in more common terms.
yeah,
Now, take that and tie it into what you just said, Jeremy, with RFK Jr. I see this is where I'm a little cautious because I agree with you. From what I've
mhm,
heard and what I've seen in his speeches and what I've read, I'm like, this guy actually knows how to speak. He is that
yeah,
old school, whether it's still a Democrat, he is
right,
that old school Democrat, the type of Democrat I used to respect.
yeah,
And it kind of leaves me a little bit because that's not who the Democratic Party is, in my opinion. Anyway, my opinion, for what it's worth, don't anyone
mhm,
dogpile. If you want to dogpile, leave it in a comment.
yeah,
And if you do something, and if you dogpile on me and you do it in a funny way, well, we'll definitely like highlight that in a future
oh
video.
yeah,
But don't dogpile me. I'm just simply saying I don't
yeah,
think that is who the Democratic Party is today anymore.
yeah,
Not from what I'm seeing.
yeah, yeah, no, and I'm inclined to agree, and I think that's much as as much as it might, I'm sure trouble some people. Uh, I don't even think that's the way the Republicans are
Oh
anymore.
hell
I
no.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the Republicans are just as
Well, Jeremy,
impotent
just
as
before
the
you even go,
Democrats.
isn't that why the Republicans hate Trump too?
Yeah, and I think that and I think in the general sphere of things, like at what point do you at what point where is the line between the two? And I know that there's some people out there that are going to say, well, like, this is what conservatives or Republicans believe, and this is what liberals and Democrats believe. It's like, yeah, but like we're at a juncture in a not a positive way, to where the line is blurred. Like there is you if you were to step if it's like the meme, and I don't know if you've seen it, but I have two pictures here. Tell me how they're different, and the person's like, they're not. like, like they're not different. Like it's the same thing, right? Like it's and I think that's where the outliers, the people that are like Trump or and perhaps RFK Jr., like maybe that's where they stand out. But there again, like I also want to caution people simply because they stand out does not mean that they're worth a shit.
Yeah.
I have very well
Again,
spoken people can attract a lot of people.
hey,
But they could
and
do
this might piss some people off, but Obama, He was very different, very outspoken, but that didn't mean shit. Hope and change. Well, what does that mean? Hope and change. Like that, you're not telling me anything. And if you look at his presidency, and I think history will prove me correct. That was a horrible period in American history, and it set the stage for where we are today. Like that was not an individual who had the interest of the country or had a good platform. Yet people just went along with it. And that's why I interrupted, because you were making that point. People will still like, oh yeah, but charismatic or whatever, first black president. Like, are we just going to elect somebody simply because of their skin color? Like, I'm going to elect the right person. I don't give a fuck. Oh, see, I just dropped my F-bomb. All right. There, we just both had our F-bombs.
That's one per episode.
Yeah, there it is. But I want to vote for somebody. I don't give a crap if, about their genitalia or their melanin content. I want to.
Are they capable?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And are they capable in the appropriate ways and not hopefully capable in ways that are destructive to who we are, Yeah. So I think people who are eloquent and well-spoken speakers there's positives to it, but at the same time, there's a lot of negatives to it, because it's like those people will be able to sell you on some of the worst ideas possible, and they can talk their way into your homes, and they will literally many people will literally be convinced to just sacrifice their liberties for the state. And that's the dangers, but that in and of itself is the epitome of politics. Is literally it's the art of lying, but doing it in the best possible way. And it's like, hey, like you don't need these things, because we will supplement these services, so you don't have to do this. And until all of a sudden something happens and you're like, no, I absolutely do need these, and now I have no form of recourse for doing this. And so the broader conversation here that I want to also imbue upon people is the party line towing, and in the cult of personality. Great song, by the way.
I wish we could play that right now.
I know, but it hits so hard.
Great pull, by the way, dude.
Right,
that was a great pull.
And it's like this cult of personality, and I could never vote for a Democrat, or I could never vote for a Republican. So don't, like, literally do the research and vote for the person that most aligns with how you feel and what you believe, like, and for good or ill. Stop being swayed by this blue wave, red wave bullshit, because it realistically, here's the thing. When it comes down to it, you're basically electing, as many have called it, the person to rule over you, because we're at a juncture right now where people are not as involved in the government apparatus as we should be. So now you're casting a ballot of who's going to be the most benevolent ruler. So if you start to sift through the party line crap, and you start to sift through the cult of personality and break these people down, you'll start to see who these people really are and whether or not they actually are worth a vote. I didn't vote for Trump. I personally don't think Trump is all that great, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. It's the same thing with DeSantis. I'm not a huge fan of DeSantis. But I also look at it from I compare this to a liberty-driven constitutional purview of, does this person check the boxes? And granted, like we talked about, you're not going to have a perfect candidate, but there's a lot of things that I feel that people overlook for the sake of an R or a D, or a red wave or a blue wave. And when we should be putting at the forefront of our voting, like, does this person check out for being constitutional? Do they check out for having a liberty-oriented mindset? I truly wish that that even for one term, it would have been interesting to see what a Ron Paul would have done, just because it's so against the grain of, even at that time, the dichotomy that we had and the dynamic that we had, that I think if it would have happened, I'm not saying I agree with Ron Paul on everything, but it really would have thrown a wrench into the whole dynamic of politics. But there again, like, people also I think at that time when they considered Ron Paul, and he appealed to a lot of younger voters, they were interested in kind of understanding people. So there's a lot at play there, but yeah, I think that anybody has the potential, but you have to objectively and really evaluate these people before you pull that lever. And even after you pull the lever, people, your job does not end there. Now you go into accountability mode, and then you go into like, hey, like, are they doing what they say they're going to do, or is what they say they're going to do constitutional? Like, dude, we are a form of checks and balances. If you vote for somebody, you better do what you can to keep them in line. Otherwise, it goes all over the place. So it's not a fire and forget mechanism.
Oh, it's not? Gee, I thought it was.
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
Oh, okay. Hey,
I'm sorry to break it to you, Mark.
no, I know. I guess I just live under a rock. But hey, so a couple things here. We're at 50 minutes, and we're trying out. And for everybody watching, we're trying out a new format, and we're a little bit here tonight. That's kind of why it's just Jeremy and I. But this is something that we're going to be doing in the future. Now, Jeremy just had some really great points there in his final kind of comments. And I shouldn't say final comments. I mean, Jeremy, I don't know if you've got a final comment, but so that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to give you got just one final comment. That's a serious comment. Then I'm going to make one, and then we're going to go into our kind of, you know what I'm getting at. So do you have anything that you want to add regarding, like, you had a really good thing right there, but is there anything else you want to add?
Well, you know, I just kind of really, really hope that we continue to go into the direction, and I think it is happening, but it's very, very slow. I hope we start to get more into the direction to where people do become more involved in more, especially in their local governments versus just the federal government. People fixate way too much on the presidential election and this and that, and it's like, dude, like, you start fixing problems at the root of where you live. People don't realize, and we will do an episode on this, but people don't realize that, like, when the states, when the Constitution was put in play, the states, when they convened and they came to the consensus of the Articles of Confederation, and then later the Constitution, each state is a sovereign body. Each state has the sovereignty of a nation like Germany or Russia or Ukraine or whatever the case is. Like, look, if you want to fix the problems, get control of your communities and your states. That's all I'm saying.
Dude, I'm sorry to time you out, but I was like, I know where you're going, but let's hold that for when we're going to do it, because I'm here to tell you, and for anyone watching, if you're still watching this point in time, it's not a giveaway episode. So if you are watching, God bless you. Thanks for watching the podcast.
Hey, appreciate it.
But what Jeremy just said right there is, like, you know, I'm not really sure if people even know the history, you know, from a social studies or American history perspective of what you just said. Like, what do you mean states are sovereign? You know, what do you mean Articles of Confederation? You see what I'm getting at? That was like, oh my God, he's on a rampage. I got to slow him down, like, because I didn't want you to. Like,
I had to end on a banger, Mark.
Well, you did, but I saw you wanting to go over the cliff and take everybody with you. I was like, no, slow down. But no, but that's a great point right there, though.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, so without taking us too far afield, you see what I'm trying to do?
Yep.
I know where you're going with that. Please finish that, but don't take us into what's going to be another hour-long conversation.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm getting at? Because we got to save that, because we have to talk about that, period. But
it merits its own episode. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Now finish your wrap up.
No. Yeah. Look, like, regardless of who's running for the presidency, right? Like, there's, again, because and I brought up the sovereignty thing, and in that episode, trust me, you'll understand a lot more. But what happens at that local level is so important. So we're sitting here talking about RFK Jr. We're talking about, Trump and DeSantis to a certain degree, and we brought up Biden and Obama and other people. But the point is they have delegated powers that they need to work within. But if there's something that they do that's wrong, if there's something you don't agree with, if there's something that's going to hurt your state has every right to say no. Your state has every right to kick out whatever federal agency they don't want. Your state, and this is my point, people, right? Like, regardless of who you want as presidency, understand that your local elections and your state elections are far more important in the grand scheme of things than the federal election. So, or the presidency rather. So like, that's what I'm going to end on. And I can't wait to get to that episode because there's a lot to go on. So,
and I'm just going to take your final comments and I'm just going to kind of wrap it up by saying it's like, I really look forward to when we talk about that, because I think that has been so forgotten by so many people. It's like, that's the president.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think that that's the person who decides, like, you really don't know how we work, then do you understand the three different branches? Like, so I'm going to table that because I think that's because I think, Jeremy, if we want to say that we have a side, not to be, I don't claim to have a side. My side is freedom. But so if my side is freedom, then I understand how powerful it is. What you just said. The local and state politics, that's where shit really gets done. Whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, Obama, Reagan, it doesn't matter. At my level, my state, my community can affect what really happens to me. And then and we're kind of giving a little bit of a preview. There's some things happening in Minnesota right now that doesn't represent where I live, and it doesn't represent the people I know. It might represent the people of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but it doesn't represent the rest of the state. And that governor doesn't represent me. And that governor who just came out and clearly just said, there's this thing called the Constitution, but I'm just going to ignore it because I think this, that's not. So again, now I'm sucking us down the rabbit hole. You need to time me out, dude. You need to be like, Mark, time out.
Hey, I'm just going to add this final point.
All right.
For those quick lesson here for those of you that don't understand how executive orders work. And I'm speaking, I'm speaking, on because everybody's obsessed about like presidencies and executive orders. As per how they're supposed to function, executive orders are null and void beyond the executive, the executive, right?
Yeah, the term of service of that executive.
They cannot affect, and they are null and void. Like, they only apply to the executive. They do not apply to anything outside of that. If there was an executive order signed tomorrow that said we are eliminating all firearms, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. It literally does not matter because that's not how executive orders function. And
that's not how our government functions.
Right. And it's like, there is such a train. I remember when people were applauding.
No, you're doing it. No, bringing it back around. Bring it back around. You're doing it.
Yeah. Look, all I'm saying is, regardless of who's in there, Trump being one of them, everybody applauded with a thunderous applause at the elimination of their liberties due to executive orders. Just saying. So at the end of the day, if you really are that worried about an R or a D, you might want to start thinking about this a little bit deeper. So,
all right. So here's what we're doing, boys and girls. We ran a little bit. We're going to run a little bit long. We really are trying to get these into an hour. But we want to wrap it up because these are some serious conversations we're trying to have because it matters, right? Because life is serious. I mean, life is life and death. I mean, it's these are serious issues. But what we want to try to do is bring a little levity in at the very end. And I want to bring up maybe two or three things. I'm going to start with something Jeremy just said, and that's how, freedom dies to the applause of, and there's a Star Wars. Well, I hate a bunch of the Star Wars movies because I think they totally went off. Whatever. Put that aside. But one of the scenes that I like in one of the movies, there's only one scene I like. And it's when Natalie Portman, whatever her character, the senator, she's in the Senate, and the Senate grants, Jeremy, and I see you nodding, you must know the scene. They grant Palpatine like, they make him the emperor and they give him all this power and everybody's clapping. And she turns to somebody else and says, and that's how freedom dies, or something like that.
Yeah, it's how liberty dies or freedom dies, which is the thunderous applause. And yeah,
I thought that was such a powerful point. The movie sucked,
yep.
but that was probably, to me,
that made the
part
movie.
of that movie.
That was the peak of that movie right there.
Yeah.
It was based as hell.
Yep. All right. Now let's try to have a little bit of fun here. So we're almost at an hour. Let's kind of take it for about 10 more minutes, and you still got an outro to do.
Yep.
So what we're going to try to do here, guys and gals, is like, we're going to try to have about, less than 5 minutes for an intro and housekeeping, then 45 minutes or so of like serious conversation between Jeremy and myself or with a guest. And then about, 10 to 15 minutes at the end, where we try to bring a little bit of the subject we've talked about and bring a little bit of levity, a little bit of humor into it, because otherwise we'll all just go fucking crazy. Dang it. That was my second F-bomb. I said I was only going to do one. I got timed out. All right. So here's my final comment, which is going to be more levity, and I'm feeding it back over to you.
Yep.
And I know everybody's already thinking it, and it's already on the tips of so many people. I almost don't want to talk about it because I don't like, I'm a baseball, well, not so much anymore, but I believe in, like, you tap the bat 2 times or whatever. I believe in those superstitions. So I don't know if I want to say this.
Won a championship, unlike the Vikings. So
that is so very true. That is so very true, sir. Hey, but so what do you think? So is there something about the Kennedy family and UFOs or some other, like, what is it that brought them into the crosshairs? I mean, we were talking about like their political perspectives and freedom and destroying, the big government and destroying, the military industrial complex and all of these things. Is that what has resulted in their demise, or is it because simply there's something about UFOs there? And is that what got them like bushwhacked? And what do you think? What about RFK, dude? I mean, like, what do you think? You think so? Trump just came out and said, I'm going to do all these, like, I'm going to declassify all the stuff on, the JFK assassination. Is RFK going to come around and say, I'm going to make Area 52 open source intel for the rest for the whole world? What do you think is going to happen there, buddy?
Well, so to kind of provide a little substance there. So to go on your first question, like, I think that the reason the Kennedys kind of had as much around them as they did, right, is for all of their hiccups, and they definitely had some scandals going on. Let's be honest. But I think that they tended to try to lean more towards the people, like supporting the people. Again, they did a lot of shit that was antithetical to it. Don't get me wrong, but I think they tried. Like they genuinely tried. One of the things is they went against the grains of several agencies too. So I think that to answer your question, I think that's kind of why maybe they kind of had that fade out there. So I think there is that too. And to kind of get into the UFO thing as well, most people didn't realize, but I did some researching and stuff like that as it pertained to Kennedy and in the space thing. But Kennedy actually was not, John F. Kennedy actually was not super enthused about going to space. It actually was not something that he genuinely had an interest in. He kind of reluctantly was like, all right, fine, if you make something happen, whatever. But like, he thought that there was more pressing things than getting to the moon, which, again, I'm not John F. Kennedy. I never will be, but I would love to have heard those conversations. I would have loved to have heard those conversations between him and some of these department heads and being like, well, what are you talking about, dude? Like, but yeah, it's interesting how I think some of the ways or some of the positions that they took were not popular. And I think they were just not popular in terms of like the people that they worked with within the government. I think that really was kind of what cinched a lot of different things because, yeah, I just think that as a family, they were too outspoken about too many things that was ultimately to their detriment.
Well, and depending on what history you want to believe or or look into, was their dad running, alcohol during the Prohibition era? Who knows?
Hey, look, that would be based as hell if he was.
Yeah. And were the two brothers having sex with the same woman? And look, I just watched a Rick and Morty episode about a week ago where they've got this reference to like the Kennedy sex tunnels, and I might be messing it up, but you see where I'm going with that. It's like there was all kinds of weird things going on there. Again, I think you made the point earlier. Like, look, we're all fallible. I mean, none of us are perfect. So whether you think JFK, was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Right. Yeah, well, he was cheating on his wife. I mean, so there's that, and and then there's the Bay of Pigs, and then there's his whole.
I was going to bring that up.
What's that?
I was going to bring up the Bay of Pigs fiasco, but
you were?
Yeah, I was going to hit on that during my diatribe, but I was like, I'll just leave it on a couple things.
Well, we should maybe, honestly, here we're talking this right now, so we can talk offline too. But I actually think we should look at, we should probably do an episode on intelligence failures, right? The Bay of Pigs. So again, we're talking about these dichotomies, this juxtaposition. Yeah. You've got, and honestly, I'm not a huge Kevin Costner fan, but it's a great movie when he's, he doesn't portray Kennedy. He portrays, not McNamara. I can't remember if he's don't anybody throw me under the bus here. I can't remember. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. It's like, what is it? 7 days. But it's about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yep.
And Costner portrays
on that.
What's that?
I said, there's so much to be said on that whole thing.
Well, this is something that they did very well. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to look that movie up tonight. I think that's what I'm watching tonight. But so there's an administration that actually pulled us from the brink and actually did something good, and then they drop the ball and do the Bay of Pigs, right? And then blah 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 blah. So I don't know, so bringing this in. So here's my last funny, kind of like lightening the mood comment. So you've got Trump talking about exposing or declassifying all the JFK, documentation about the assassination. And then you got RFK, who clearly has no love for the CIA. And we'll save that for another conversation because, I might be on that side. I mean, I'm like, man, the CIA, it isn't what it used to be, and I haven't been there in a long time. And I don't know, maybe we need to kind of reassess, get rid of the FBI and the CIA and go back to an OSS style and, something, but I digress. So Jeremy, my question to you though, is like, if who should RFK's, on a funny note, if Trump gets the Republican nomination and RFK does not get the Democratic, should Trump approach RFK and get him to be his running mate? Or vice versa, or you see where I'm kind of going with that, trying to have a little fun? What do you think? Or should Rand Paul be in the mix someplace as an independent?
Look, I genuinely would love to see a libertarian or somebody like I would genuinely love to see a libertarian or at least a fairly liberty-oriented person as a running mate with RFK Jr. Like my first person, and I will always go to this because I just think it would be kind of humorous to see what would happen. But I'd love to see an RFK Ron Paul ticket just once, just once in my life. Like.
Okay, but if not Ron Paul, what about his son Rand Paul?
I think Rand is definitely not his father. At least in terms of withheld beliefs. It doesn't make him a terrible person, but there is a schism there to where
but there's also a lot of crossover.
Yes. And so I think Rand would be potentially a good person, possibly to go with. I think, to be fair, I think an RFK Massey ticket might be interesting too.
Wow.
but I think that might be interesting. But
I think because it starts with an R, I think it should be RFK and RedBeard. That's what I think. RFK and RedBeard.
Hey,
24, baby. 24.
So my curiosity on this whole RFK thing, RFK Jr. thing is, was it predicted by The Simpsons? That is the burning question I've had since we started.
I don't think they did an episode on this. I don't think they did.
Hey, if anybody, leave a comment below. If there's diehard Simpsons fans, was the RFK presidential or RFK Jr. presidential run, was this predicted by The Simpsons? Because Simpsons rarely misses, Mark. You know this.
Hey, I'm just going to throw this out right. This is not a giveaway episode, but if somebody comes up with a good answer, again, it doesn't even have to be truthful.
Selfish
endeavor. It has to be funny. I will give away like a belt pouch, or I'll give something away from Centerline Systems if somebody leaves a good comment on that question.
100%. Like this is a selfish endeavor. I genuinely want to know, like, did the Simpsons predict this? Like, in my opinion, the Simpsons has already surpassed AI because they predicted accurately more things than AI ever will.
No, you've got it backwards. They based AI off of the Simpsons. The Simpsons was the root level programming that has led to AI.
If that's the case, if that's the case,
look, dude, the Simpsons had Elon Musk on there. I'm sure they did. They must have, right? So come on.
Yeah, they if they based AI off of the Simpsons, we're all screwed. Like there's
true.
Like 100%. Like the Simpsons at this juncture, if we get to a Simpsons level of intelligence, it's more terrifying than Skynet, because Skynet's still lost in the several different factors. Like the Simpsons rarely misses, dude. And they
if we could cryogenically freeze ourselves and come back 100 years from now, and if there's something called the Simpsons level of intelligence, if that's a metric, a scale by which we're basing like supercomputers or AI in the future, dude, I'm gonna blame you, and in this moment in time right now, for like throwing that out there as a possibility.
Like I will say though, like the Simpsons really drive nuclear power pretty hardcore too, which is fairly interesting.
All right, enough of Matt Groening. All right, hey, it's God dang it, dude, I do this almost every time. I literally almost said 1 minute and 11 seconds. It's been an hour and 10 minutes.
Every single freaking time.
I don't know what the hell it is. That is clearly some type of Freudian slip or Faustian something. I don't know what the reference is there. Matter of fact, somebody leave a comment about that. Why does Mark always want to say 1 minute as opposed to an hour? Because I've had so much fun. It seems like we've only been talking for 1 minute. That's my answer.
You did have one episode where you got it right, but
only one.
I think we should.
One out of 8. Those are really good Vegas odds right there. One out of 8.
All right. If anybody's interested in taking up this behemoth task from the first episode on, like, I want to know. I want to get a ticker started of how many times Mark does this.
How many times I've effed that up? Well, it's at least 8. All right, 8. Here we go. We're wrapping it up. Thank you. This is my final comment, and then Jeremy's got the outros as we're kind of developing this going forward. Again, thank you very much for everybody who's watched these episodes, our podcast. Please leave a comment below.
Yes.
I think I should have done this in housekeeping. Oh, you'll get your chance. Let me just finish. I should have done this in housekeeping. Is that, you always hear people say, please like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. But the reality is, from my business side, Centerline Systems, and then us starting this right now, it really does matter. So please do. If you are watching this and if you like this content, give us a comments. Let us know how you want the content to be tweaked, how we can improve it, make it more palatable or digestible for you. But more importantly, if you believe in freedom, share this with people, because this is where I know I'm saying that kind of in a funny way at the beginning in the intro, but you are the resistance. It is up to us. It is up 100%. To each and every one of us. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy full screen, and I'll take your cue, sir.
Yeah. So, really, like, me and Mark have talked about this, and on just kind of a closing note, like, we really, really have enjoyed being able to do this, and we've really enjoyed being able to provide these videos and do these videos, because really, like, our from the very inception of this, we want to bring people together, regardless of your politics, regardless of whatever, and really have honest conversations about this. And you know, this really hits home for us. So in so many ways. So we're grateful for the people that have subscribed. We're grateful for the people that comment and like and stuff like that. And look, like, we are fighting a behemoth here. That is, you know, like, I hate to say it, but like, I am very happy with the progress that we've made just in the few videos that we've done. And what it shows is there are people that do care about what we're talking about. There are people out there that really do have an interest in having honest conversations, or listening to a couple buffoons, you know, just go on conjecture at times.
But buffoons with sexy beards.
Well, you know, I mean, yeah. I didn't want to inflate the ego that much, but yeah.
Well, I'm just calling it how I see it.
So, yeah, no, thank you everybody for your support. We greatly appreciate your support. And, you know, that's pretty much all I have. So I'm going to wrap it up with saying this. Look, people, as long as there are good, liberty-minded people, as long as there are people that genuinely want to stand up and do the right thing, the flame of liberty shall not and will not be extinguished.
Damn right. Damn right. All right, everybody. Well, here, I'll do it with the correct hand. See you on the next podcast.
See you on the flip side.
All right. Thanks, everybody.